Lucía Moreno, Kareem Al-Zafir, and an unknown fixer, three lives entangled in a web of wealth, secrecy, and murder, would change the meaning of trust forever. One woman's first private jet trip became a journey into darkness, and what followed would shock two continents. Please subscribe for daily new update of crime story and watch till end. Lucía Moreno had always believed that freedom meant movement. She grew up in a small town near Malaga, where days felt predictable and futures felt limited. From a young age, she dreamed of seeing places beyond the horizon. She worked different jobs, saved money carefully, and slowly built a life online as a travel blogger. Her content was simple but honest. People followed her because she showed real streets, real food, and real emotions. She was not famous, but she was hopeful. Her life changed when she met Kareem Al-Zafir during a sponsored event in Barcelona. He was older, calm, and carried himself with quiet authority. Unlike others, he did not speak much about himself. His wealth was obvious but never directly mentioned. Lucía felt drawn to the mystery around him. To her, he represented a world that existed far above her own. Over time, trips replaced texts, and luxury replaced routine. She told herself this was just another journey, only bigger. Dubai was unlike anything Lucía had imagined. The city felt unreal, as if it had been built to impress rather than to exist. Kareem's residence was guarded, silent, and filled with rules she did not fully understand. Still, she focused on the beauty. She posted photos of skylines, beaches, and deserts, carefully avoiding anything that felt too personal. Her followers admired her life, unaware of how controlled it had become. The private jet was something Lucía never expected to experience. She had flown economy all her life, squeezed between strangers. This time, the cabin was empty except for her and the quiet hum of wealth. The leather seats, the soft lighting, and the absence of noise made it feel unreal. She took photos, smiling, believing this moment marked the peak of her journey. She believed this flight meant she had finally arrived somewhere important. What Lucía did not see were the details she had learned to ignore. She did not question why the flight details were vague. She did not ask why no destination was clearly shared. She trusted that someone with so much power would also provide safety. The idea of danger felt distant, almost impossible. Her past struggles had taught her to survive hardship, not betrayal. As the jet prepared to depart, Lucía felt a mix of excitement and relief. She believed her life was expanding, not narrowing. She believed the sky represented opportunity, not isolation. This was the first time she allowed herself to think she no longer belonged to the world she came from. She had stepped into something new, something higher, without realizing how far she had moved away from protection, from witnesses, and from escape. That night, the aircraft lifted into the dark sky. Lucía looked out the window one last time, unaware that this moment would become the final image of her life shared with the world. The flight promised beginnings, but it was already carrying her toward an ending she could not see. The relationship between Lucía Moreno and Kareem Al-Zafir did not grow through shared moments, but through controlled distance. From the outside, everything looked perfect. Expensive hotels, sudden trips, and a lifestyle that most people only saw in movies became normal for her. Yet beneath the surface, there was an imbalance she could feel but could not explain. Kareem decided when they traveled, where they stayed, and how long they remained. Lucía followed without question, believing structure was the price of privilege. Kareem rarely spoke about his past. His work was always described in broad terms that never led to details. When Lucía asked questions, answers were short and carefully shaped. Over time, she stopped asking. She told herself that privacy was part of his culture and power. She believed that trust meant acceptance. Slowly, her curiosity faded, replaced by dependence on his approval. Lucía noticed that her world had grown quieter. Messages from friends went unanswered for days. Calls to family became shorter. Time zones were used as excuses, but the truth was deeper. She felt pressure to stay present, alert, and careful. Kareem disliked unpredictability. He preferred calm and order. Lucía learned to adjust her behavior without being asked. She dressed differently, spoke less, and shared fewer details online. There were rules she was never formally given but clearly understood. Some areas of his residences were off-limits. Certain staff avoided eye contact with her. Meetings happened behind closed doors. When Kareem traveled alone, Lucía was left waiting without explanation. She told herself that powerful people lived complicated lives. Still, a quiet unease followed her, even during moments of luxury. The gifts continued, expensive and frequent. Jewelry arrived without reason. Trips were planned suddenly. These gestures made it harder for Lucía to admit her discomfort. Gratitude replaced doubt. She felt ungrateful whenever fear crossed her mind. She convinced herself that her discomfort came from insecurity, not danger. Her online presence also changed. Her posts became less personal and more polished. The warmth her followers once admired slowly disappeared. She avoided live videos and stopped sharing her location. Some followers noticed and commented, but Lucía ignored them. She believed she was evolving, becoming more refined. In reality, she was becoming invisible. There were moments when Lucía sensed she was being watched even when Kareem was not around. Security followed her movements closely, always present but never speaking. At first, it felt protective. Later, it felt limiting. She could not leave without approval. Spontaneity vanished from her life. Freedom, once her goal, became something she no longer recognized. Despite everything, Lucía stayed. She believed leaving would mean losing everything she had gained. She feared returning to her old life more than she feared the unknown around her. Silence became her way of surviving. She learned that saying less meant fewer problems. By the time the private jet was mentioned for the first time, Lucía was already deeply entangled. She did not see the flight as a warning, but as a reward. She had learned to accept mystery as normal and control as care. That acceptance would soon cost her everything. The night of the flight arrived without ceremony. There was no clear schedule shared with Lucía, only instructions to be ready. Her phone showed no destination, no boarding pass, and no public record of travel. This was not unusual anymore. She had learned that questions led nowhere. A quiet car took her to a private section of the airport, far from crowds and cameras. The silence felt heavier than before. The jet stood alone under artificial lights, white and spotless, with no visible markings. There were no other passengers waiting. No announcements echoed through the air. Everything felt carefully removed from the normal world. Lucía stepped inside carrying only a small bag. Her larger luggage had already been taken earlier in the day, handled by staff she did not know. The moment felt rushed, as if delay itself was a risk. Inside the aircraft, the space felt vast and empty. The comfort was undeniable, yet the absence of human presence made it unsettling. The crew avoided interaction, moving with purpose and restraint. Lucía took a single photo from her seat and posted it online, unaware that it would become her final trace. Within minutes, the aircraft door closed, sealing her away from anything familiar. As the jet lifted into the night sky, Lucía tried to calm herself by focusing on the view below. The city lights faded quickly, replaced by darkness. Time seemed to stretch. There were no updates, no flight map visible, no sense of direction. The quiet was constant, broken only by the sound of the engines. She rested, assuming she would wake closer to wherever they were going. Hours passed unnoticed. At some point, the aircraft descended. Lucía felt the change but saw nothing through the windows. The stop was brief. No one explained it. The engines restarted soon after, and the jet returned to the air. This interruption never appeared on any official flight record. Whatever happened on the ground was meant to remain unseen. When the jet disappeared from global tracking systems, alarms were silently triggered in places that would not react for weeks. To the outside world, the aircraft simply continued its journey. To Lucía's family and followers, her silence meant nothing at first. She had vanished before, but this time there would be no return message, no delayed post, no sign of movement. Days passed, her phone remained inactive, her account stayed frozen, friends assumed she was traveling, her family grew worried. They contacted authorities, but there was no clear country to investigate. The flight path led nowhere. Immigration systems showed no arrival. Airline databases had no record. It was as if Lucía had never landed anywhere at all. The private jet returned to Dubai days later without her. No report was filed. No explanation was given. Staff changed. Records were adjusted. Whatever happened in the air stayed there. Kareem resumed his routine. Business continued. Life moved forward for everyone except Lucía. By the time concern turned into fear, the sky had already erased her. The flight that promised transformation had instead removed her from the world completely. Her disappearance became a puzzle without edges, floating between continents, hidden by wealth, power, and silence. The discovery happened far from cities, cameras, and airports. In the dry desert of northern Arizona, a group of hikers strayed from a marked trail while searching for shade. What they found, partially buried in the sand, stopped them immediately. At first, it was unclear what they were seeing. The remains were badly decomposed, exposed to heat, wind, and animals. Only part of a human body was present. There were no clothes, no identification, and no personal items nearby. The location felt deliberately chosen for disappearance rather than discovery. Local authorities arrived and secured the area. The condition of the remains suggested they had been there for weeks. The heat had erased many details that could have helped investigators. There were signs that the body had not arrived naturally. This was not an accident, not an animal attack, and not the result of someone getting lost. The way the remains were positioned suggested intentional placement. Someone had wanted this body hidden, but not completely. At first, the case seemed impossible to trace. Missing person databases in the United States returned nothing. The remains did not match any local reports. With no immediate leads, the case risked being filed away as another unidentified death in a remote area. Still, one investigator pushed for advanced forensic testing, believing the location and condition pointed to something larger. DNA analysis took time. When the results came back, they raised more questions than answers. The genetic profile did not match anyone reported missing in the region. Instead, it showed strong indicators of Southern European ancestry. That result shifted the investigation across borders. International databases were contacted. Weeks passed before a potential match emerged from Spain. Dental records confirmed what the DNA suggested. The remains belonged to Lucía Moreno, missing for over a month. The confirmation shocked everyone involved. She had last been seen boarding a private jet in Dubai. There was no record of her entering the United States, legally or otherwise. No flight path connected her disappearance to Arizona. The distance between where she vanished and where she was found made no logical sense. The condition of the remains raised darker concerns. Only half of her body had been recovered. There were signs that the separation had occurred before arrival at the desert. This suggested transportation, planning, and knowledge of how to avoid detection. The desert was not the place of death. It was only the final dumping ground. News of the discovery spread quietly at first. Authorities avoided public statements while notifying Lucía's family. For them, grief arrived mixed with confusion. There was no explanation for how she crossed oceans unseen. There was no timeline that fit. Every answer created more questions. Investigators began to understand that this case did not belong to one country. It belonged to the space between systems, where private aircraft, unchecked borders, and powerful individuals operated beyond normal oversight. Lucía's disappearance was no longer just a missing person case. It was evidence of how easily someone could be erased, moved, and discarded when wealth and influence controlled the path. The desert had revealed what the sky had hidden, but it had not revealed the truth. That truth was still protected, buried deeper than the sand. Once Lucía Moreno was identified, attention shifted quickly toward the last known person connected to her disappearance. Kareem Al-Zafir's name appeared in every report, yet it never fully entered any courtroom. His background was carefully constructed, layered with corporate titles, international partnerships, and legal protections that stretched across borders. On paper, he was untouchable. Investigators knew this before they even began. Requests for cooperation were sent through official channels. Responses came slowly and were limited. Travel records showed Kareem had left Dubai only briefly during the period of Lucía's disappearance. Always with documentation that placed him far from suspicion. His private jet activity was recorded in fragments, never complete enough to form a clear timeline. Critical gaps appeared exactly where answers were needed most. Surveillance footage from the private terminal where Lucía was last seen had been overwritten. Airport officials claimed routine data cycling. Staff members who had been on duty that night were no longer employed. Some had left the country. Others could not be located. Every missing piece was explained away as coincidence or administrative failure. Legal barriers emerged quickly. Kareem's legal team responded to inquiries with carefully worded statements denying any personal relationship beyond companionship. They emphasized that Lucía was an adult who traveled willingly, without a confirmed crime scene, without a cause of death, and without a clear timeline. Prosecutors found themselves trapped. Suspicion alone was not enough. Behind the scenes, pressure mounted. Investigators were warned that pursuing certain angles could damage diplomatic relations. Funding for international travel was delayed. Requests for expanded warrants were denied without explanation. The case began to stall, not because of lack of evidence, but because of where the evidence pointed. Meanwhile, Kareem continued his public life uninterrupted. He attended events, appeared in business reports, and traveled freely. His image remained polished. To the outside world, nothing had changed. There was no public acknowledgement of Lucía's existence, let alone her death. Silence became his strongest defense. One investigator noted that every system designed to protect the vulnerable failed at once. Immigration systems did not flag the private jet. Customs never recorded her entry. Financial records showed nothing unusual. It was as if Lucía had never been on that aircraft at all. Only her remains proved she had existed beyond a digital footprint. As weeks passed, momentum faded. Media interest slowed due to lack of official statements. Without public pressure, agencies shifted resources elsewhere. Lucía's case was quietly downgraded from active investigation to unresolved international matter. No charges were filed. No suspects were named. What remained was an uncomfortable understanding. Kareem did not need to hide evidence. He only needed to exist above the systems meant to uncover it. His power did not erase Lucía directly. It erased the path leading to him. By the time authorities accepted this, the trail was already cold. Lucía's name stayed in files, but not in courtrooms. Kareem's remained in boardrooms, untouched. The imbalance was complete, and justice never found a place to stand. The case changed direction when a junior analyst reviewed data that had been dismissed as irrelevant. While rechecking aviation paperwork, the analyst noticed a cargo manifest linked to the private jet used during Lucía's final flight. It listed standard supplies, fuel adjustments, and technical equipment. Hidden among these entries was a coded reference that did not match any known aviation category. At first glance, it appeared meaningless, but its repetition across several flights suggested otherwise. Further examination revealed that the code corresponded to a private logistics contractor operating across Eastern Europe and the Middle East. The company had no public website and existed only through shell registrations. Its services were rarely documented, but intelligence agencies recognized the pattern. This contractor specialized in problem resolution for elite clients. Their work involved moving people, objects, and information without leaving trails. One name surfaced repeatedly in connection with the contractor. It belonged to a man known only through aliases, never a legal identity. His history showed proximity to cases that vanished quietly. Missing witnesses, lost evidence, and unresolved deaths often appeared in regions he had passed through. He was not officially employed by anyone, yet he always arrived before complications disappeared. Flight data showed that Lucía's jet made an unscheduled landing in a small, privately controlled airstrip in Eastern Europe. The stop lasted less than an hour. No passengers were recorded disembarking, yet fuel logs indicated extended ground activity. Satellite images from that night were unavailable due to routine maintenance gaps. Once again, coincidence shielded intent. Investigators believed this stop marked a turning point. Something had gone wrong in the air, or something had been discovered that could not be allowed to surface. Lucía's presence became a liability. The fixer's involvement suggested a controlled response rather than a spontaneous act. This was not panic, it was procedure. As authorities prepared to act on this information, resistance followed. The contractor's records were protected under multiple jurisdictions. Requests for extradition of associated individuals were delayed indefinitely. Intelligence partners refused to share classified material. Every attempt to push forward triggered a silent retreat. Then the trail ended abruptly. The fixer disappeared. His known aliases stopped appearing in databases. Bank accounts went dormant. Travel patterns ceased. It was as if he had been erased using the same methods he once applied to others. The contractor dissolved within weeks, leaving behind no physical offices, no staff, and no accountability. The timing was not ignored. The disappearance occurred just as investigators were preparing to connect the unscheduled landing to Lucia's remains in Arizona. The distance between those points suggested private transport beyond commercial systems. It also suggested access to restricted routes and unchecked borders. Without the fixer, the theory could not be proven. It remained speculation, too precise to dismiss, yet too incomplete to prosecute. The truth hovered just out of reach, protected by layers of legality and silence. Lucia's case now carried a shadow name within investigative circles. It represented the moment when evidence pointed clearly toward intent, only to be swallowed by influence. The unscheduled stop, the coded manifest, and the vanished contractor formed a pattern that everyone recognized, but no one could officially confirm. The case had not gone cold. It had been deliberately frozen, locked in a place where truth was visible but unreachable. Momentum briefly returned when prosecutors began assembling a case built on patterns rather than proof. They understood that direct evidence had been removed, but circumstantial links formed a clear shape. The private jet's altered records, the unscheduled landing, the coded cargo entry, and the sudden disappearance of key individuals all pointed in the same direction. For a short time, it seemed possible that persistence alone might break through the silence. That hope did not last. Digital files related to the jet's navigation history became unreadable after a system update. Backups that should have existed were reported as corrupted. Requests to recover older versions were denied due to security protocols. Each failure was justified with technical language that sounded reasonable but left no room for challenge. Technology, once expected to preserve truth, became another wall. Human evidence followed the same path. A financial analyst who had traced unusual transactions connected to the logistics contractor was reassigned to an unrelated department. An investigator who pushed for international subpoenas was removed from the case without explanation. No accusations were made, no threats issued. Authority moved quietly, applying pressure without leaving fingerprints. An attempt to issue an international warrant stalled at the approval stage. Officials cited insufficient evidence and potential diplomatic consequences. Behind closed doors, it was understood that namming a powerful individual without absolute proof would damage relationships that extended far beyond one case. Justice became a negotiation, and Lucia's name carried little weight in that exchange. Media interest spiked briefly when leaked information hinted at high-level involvement. Within days, those reports disappeared. Articles were retracted. Sources went silent. Editors cited legal risk. The story lost visibility, not because it lacked substance, but because it attracted attention from places that preferred darkness. Meanwhile, Kareem Al-Zafir returned to Dubai and resumed his life as if nothing had occurred. His movements were lawful, his public image intact. No warrants followed him. No questions reached him directly. From a legal standpoint, he was untouched. From a practical standpoint, he was unreachable. The final blow came when remaining physical evidence was deemed inadmissible. Chain of custody issues were cited. Jurisdictional conflicts rendered forensic conclusions unusable in court. Without a clear cause of death or location of crime, the case collapsed inward. It did not end with a ruling. It simply stopped moving. Lucia's file was marked unresolved, not closed, but dormant. It joined a category reserved for cases that could not proceed without cooperation that would never arrive. Her death remained acknowledged but unexplained. Responsibility remained implied but unassigned. Those who had worked the case understood what had happened. They recognized the pattern of influence overriding accountability. Still, understanding brought no resolution. The system had protected itself by sacrificing truth. In the end, evidence did not vanish all at once. It faded piece by piece, each loss small enough to justify, until nothing strong enough remained to stand against power. Lucía was lost a second time, not in the sky or the desert, but within institutions that chose silence over confrontation. Even after the case was officially deemed unresolved, Lucía Moreno's story refused to disappear. Online, her name circulated quietly at first, on forums, travel blogs, and social media groups dedicated to missing persons. Her final photo from the private jet continued to surface, frozen in time, a reminder of the moment when freedom had shifted into something far darker. People were captivated by the mystery, but the details were fragmented, scattered across continents, and often contradicted by official silence. The more the public tried to understand, the more it seemed the truth had been deliberately hidden. Documentaries and investigative reports began piecing together the fragments that official channels could not touch. Viewers were drawn to the contrast between Lucia's bright personality and the cold, meticulous forces that had removed her from the world. Analysts speculated endlessly about Kareem Al-Zafir, the coded cargo manifests, the fixer in Eastern Europe, and the half of her body discovered in the Arizona desert. Each piece of evidence painted a picture of danger, power, and extreme planning, but none provided definitive answers. The story remained incomplete, but hauntingly compelling. Her family struggled with grief and confusion. They had to accept that official agencies could do no more, and yet they refused to let her memory fade. They gathered her followers, friends, and supporters into awareness campaigns, highlighting the risks of unchecked power and the vulnerability of those who dared to step into worlds far beyond their own. Lucia's disappearance became a symbol of caution, a reminder that charm, luxury, and wealth could disguise threats unimaginable to most people. Over time, Lucia's case inspired discussions about international oversight, private aviation, and the gaps in global law enforcement. Experts dissected how someone could vanish between continents without leaving a trace, examining legal loopholes, corruptible systems, and the limits of surveillance. Every conversation emphasized the same chilling truth. Systems designed to protect people could fail completely when confronted by extreme influence and secrecy. Her story became more than a tragedy, it became a lesson. Yet despite all the speculation and analysis, the emotional impact never lessened. Viewers imagined the fear, confusion, and betrayal Lucía must have felt in her final hours. They imagined a bright, adventurous woman trapped in a world she barely understood, caught between devotion and danger, innocence and malevolence. That tension between hope and horror kept people returning to her story, searching for closure that would never come. Even without justice, Lucía continued to affect the world. Every documentary, article, and online post kept her alive in memory. Her story circulated like a warning whispered across borders, a narrative that refused to allow silence to win completely. People debated, theorized, and mourned, collectively piecing together her journey, even if they could never reconstruct it fully. In the end, her tale remained unfinished, suspended between life and disappearance, truth and secrecy. The sky that once promised freedom had become a final cage. The desert that revealed her remains became a testament to the reach of power. Lucia's story lingered, a shadow over luxury, privilege, and unchecked authority. Though the world never found closure, it could not forget her. Her name continued to echo, a permanent reminder that some stories, no matter how carefully erased, refuse to die.